No contact breaks the avoidant in a way you never expected. Let's talk about something most people don't know admit. Sometimes, the best way to be heard by someone who's pulling away is to say nothing at all. When you're dealing with someone emotionally avoidant, your instinct is to chase, to explain, to fix. You think, if I could just help them see how good we are together. But that approach often backfires. Why? Because the more you lean in, the more they lean out. Avoidants thrive in distance, and they fear what closeness could mean. So when you pull back not as a manipulation, but as an act of self-respect, something interesting happens. You shift the energy. Suddenly, you're no longer the pursuer. You're no longer the one asking, why can't you love me the way I love you? You're the one who respects yourself enough to stop dancing for someone who won't even show up to the floor. And here's the twisting, that space you create. It doesn't just give them time to miss you. It holds up a mirror that reflects the silence they helped create, a mirror that forces them to sit in the discomfort they've been running from. Avoidants don't fear losing you. They fear the version of themselves that they pretend to be when you're around. When you go silent, when you go no contact, they're left alone with the very thing they've been avoiding all along, themselves. That's when the shift happens, not always immediately, not always obviously, but in a way you never expected. Because now, for the first time, they have to confront the reality of who you were and what they risked losing by staying distant. And for you, that silence isn't emptiness, it's power, it's clarity. It's the beginning of choosing someone who doesn't need distance to feel safe, but sees closeness as a gift to protect. When someone pulls away from us emotionally, especially an avoidant partner, our natural instinct is to fill the silence. We call, we text, we ask what's wrong, and we try to reestablish the connection in any way we can. This reaction comes from a place of care and fear of losing them, of being misunderstood, or of leaving things unresolved. But ironically, the more we try to close that emotional gap, the wider it becomes. In those moments, what we don't realize is that silence, intentional, self-respecting silence, can speak louder than any words ever could. When you initiate no contact, it's not about playing games. It's not about trying to manipulate someone into coming back. It's about recognizing that the dynamic is unbalanced. One person is giving, reaching, questioning, while the other is retreating, deflecting, and avoiding. This kind of imbalance creates emotional noise, confusion, refusement, and desperation. Choosing to step back removes you from that chaos. It gives you back your dignity, your calm, and your voice. Not the desperate voice that begs to be heard, but the quiet one that says, I know my worth, and I won't keep yelling into silence. People often misunderstand no contact. They think it's cold, harsh, or even immature. But in reality, it's an act of radical self-respect. It says, I care about you, but I care about myself too. And in doing so, it sends a powerful message. It allows the other person to feel the absence of your energy, your presence, your emotional labor. All the things they may have taken for granted. Avoidant individuals often cope by creating emotional distance. When they feel overwhelmed by intimacy or the pressure of someone else's needs, they pull back. This behavior may not even be intentional, but it's deeply ingrained. And when you keep reaching out, it confirms their fear that closeness is suffocating or demanding. However, when you remove yourself from the equation, when you stop reaching, explaining, and fixing, it does something unexpected. It disarms them. It shifts the narrative. Suddenly, you're no longer confirming their fears. You're challenging them. In silence, your absence begins to speak. It says, I will not chase you. It says, I am not afraid of your silence. And most importantly, it says, if you are not ready to meet me halfway, I am prepared to walk away. That kind of message is powerful, not because it's shooted, but because it's consistent. Silence doesn't mean you're waiting. It means you're done explaining. It means you're choosing peace over anxiety, clarity over chaos. No contact gives space for reflection, not just for them, but for you. It's a pause that can reset the entire dynamic. This is you not. And often, it's the only thing that truly gets through to someone who isn't emotionally present. When you stop speaking into the void, you start speaking to yourself again. You start listening to what you need. And for the first time, you give the other person a chance to hear what your silence really means. Avoidant individuals often operate from a deeply rooted fear of emotional closeness. To them, intimacy can feel suffocating, vulnerable, and even dangerous. Their nervous system has been trained, consciously or not, to equate closeness with losing control or being hurt. So when a relationship begins to deepen, or when emotions become intense, their reflex is to create distance. They pull away, not necessarily because they don't care, but because closeness triggers discomfort they don't know how to regulate. This is where many people make a critical mistake. They respond by leaning in harder, hoping to soothe or chase the connection back into existence. The problem is that avoidants don't respond to pressure. They respond to space. When you try to talk it out, clarify things, or show more love in an effort to close the emotional gap, they feel overwhelmed. Every message, every attempt to reconnect can feel like a threat to their sense of control. It's not that your words aren't meaningful. It is that their emotional system is wired to protect them from the very thing you're trying to give in closeness. That's why going no contact, stepping back, choosing space, is often the most effective and least expected move. Space doesn't mean rejection. It means breathing room. And ironically, it's the very thing avoidants need in order to begin feeling safe again. When you stop trying to close the distance and start respecting it, something begins to shift. They're no longer reacting to the pressure of your presence. They're sitting with the absence of it. And that absence does something subtle but powerful. It lowers their defenses. It lets their nervous system relax because no one is chasing, no one is demanding, is asking them to open up faster than they're capable of. When someone feels space instead of pressure, it gives them the freedom to feel their own feelings without interference. Avoidants often don't process their emotions in real time. They need solitude to unpack what they're actually feeling. If you keep interrupting that process by trying to fix or talk through everything, they may never fully access those emotions. But when you step back, not in anger, but in quiet self-respect, you create the environment where real reflection becomes possible. And that reflection is what creates movement, not your efforts to pull them closer. Ironically, many people go no contact hoping to provoke a reaction, and that usually backfires. But when you do it from a genuine place of detachment, when you truly release the outcome, that's when it often has the greatest impact. Avoidants are not immune to loss, they're just good at pretending it doesn't affect them. But space, real, uninterrupted space, has a way of bringing their buried emotions to the surface. That's when they start miss not just you, but the version of themselves they felt safe hiding behind. And if any transformation is going to happen, it starts in that silent gap where pressure is replaced with peace. Emotional dynamics in relationships are often invisible until something disrupts them. When you're dealing with an avoidant partner, the dynamic can easily become one-sided. You find yourself constantly initiating conversations, asking how they feel, trying to connect, while they grow more distant or shut down. This imbalance creates tension, not only between the two of you, but within yourself. You begin to question your worth, your actions, and whether you're too much. It's exhausting. And the more you push for closeness, the more they seem to retreat. That's where the power of no contact comes in. It breaks the pattern and shifts the dynamic in a way that changes everything. When you go no contact, you're not punishing the other person. You're resetting the emotional playing field. You're stepping away from a role you never agreed to play: the fixer, the chaser, the one who keeps the relationship alive single-handedly. This isn't about silent treatment or manipulation. It's unbout you not. It's about reclaiming your energy and acknowledging that something needs to change. And that change starts with you choosing yourself. By removing yourself from the cycle of pursuit and withdrawal, you stop feeding the dynamic that was keeping you stuck. Avoidant partners often don't change their behavior because they've never had a reason to. They may not even realize how imbalanced the relationship feels. This isn't about you not, because you've been the one doing all the emotional labor. When you go silent, when you remove your energy from the situation, they're forced to experience the void you leave behind. That's not something they expect, especially if they've come to rely on your presence without reciprocating it. And that's what makes the shift so powerful. Suddenly, the roles are no longer familiar. You are no longer the one reaching out. You are no longer the emotional safety net. This shift is important because it creates contrast. People often need contrast to truly see and feel the impact of someone's absence. As long as you're always available, emotionally, physically, energetically, your presence becomes expected, even undervalued. But when you step back and remove that presence, they're left to confront what it meant. This is especially impactful for someone avoidant who often doesn't feel the weight of emotional consequences until space makes it impossible to ignore. More importantly, this shift isn't just about them. It's about you. Going no contact allows you to recalibrate your own emotional needs. It's easy to lose yourself when you're constantly trying to prove your worth to someone who won't meet you halfway. Stepping back gives you the space to remember who you were before the dynamic consumed you. It puts the focus back on your healing, your boundaries, and your clarity. You stop trying to decode their silence and instead listen to your own. No contact isn't just a tactic. It's a declaration. It says, I will no longer participate in a dynamic where I am undervalued or unheard. And that declaration, even in silence, has the power to change the entire emotional landscape of the relationship. When you step into no contact with an avoidant person, something significant happens, not just for you, but for them. You remove your voice, your presence, and your emotional availability, and in doing so, you hold up a mirror they can't easily avoid. For perhaps the first time, they are left alone in the space where your connection used to live. And that space, that silence, is deeply uncomfortable, Not because you're punishing them, but because they can no longer distract themselves with your presence. They are now faced with themselves. Avoidant individuals often rely on emotional distance to feel safe. They push people away when things get too intimate, too real, or too emotionally demanding. They may not always do it maliciously or even consciously. It's often a coping mechanism formed long before you ever came into the picture. But as long as someone is chasing them, reaching out, or trying to bridge the gap, they're able to stay emotionally detached while still benefiting from the connection. They don't have to confront the reality of their avoidance, because your efforts shield them from it. You carry the weight of both your feelings and theirs, but when you go no contact, you remove that shield. There's no more checking in, no more just making sure you're okay, no more emotional buffering. What they're left with is silence, and that silence doesn't just represent the absence of communication. It reflects every ignored message, every deflected conversation, every moment they turned away when you tried to reach them. That's the mirror. It's not about guilt tripping them or teaching them a lesson. It's about forcing them to sit in the emotional reality they've been avoiding. This process can be incredibly uncomfortable for someone who's used to staying disconnected. Avoidants often suppress their emotions until they become impossible to ignore. When no contact begins, they might initially feel relief, no pressure, no expectations. But over time, the space starts to feel hollow. What used to be filled by your presence, your messages, your warmth, your efforts, is now empty. And that absence creates an emotional vacuum they didn't anticipate. It's in that vacuum that reflection begins. They begin to ask themselves questions they've avoided for so long. Did I push too hard? Was I wrong about them? Why do I feel this way now? This kind of introspection doesn't always happen right away, and it's not guaranteed to lead to transformation. But if it's going to happen, it often starts with the discomfort that silence brings. People don't usually reflect when things are convenient. They reflect when they're confronted with the consequences of their actions. The mirror you hold up with your absence is not meant to shame them. It simply reveals the truth they've refused to look at. And while they're facing that mirror, something else happens. They begin to realize the value of what they had. It's not always about missing you in the romantic sense. It's about recognizing the emotional stability, empathy, and presence that you brought into their life. That realization only surfaces in the clarity of space, in the kind of silence that makes them hear, maybe for the first time, what they've really been avoiding. When you go no contact, it can initially feel like a void. There's silence where there used to be conversation, stillness where there used to be emotional movement. For someone who has been deeply invested in a relationship, especially with an avoidant partner, that silence can feel terrifying. You wonder what they're thinking, if they miss you, if they even notice your absence. But over time, something unexpected begins to happen. The silence becomes a source of clarity. What once felt like emptiness transforms into insight, strength, and perspective. You begin to hear your own voice again, free from the noise of constantly trying to fix, please, or prove. When you're wrapped up in a relationship with someone who is emotionally avoidant, it's easy to lose track of what you need. You become so focused on managing their discomfort, soothing their fears, and decoding their distance that your own needs start to feel secondary, or worse, like a burden. You may have asked yourself, am I being too needy? Or should I just give them more space? You start bending and shrinking in the hopes that they'll feel safe enough to come closer. But when you go no contact, you finally step out of that cycle. You stop asking how to make yourself smaller, and you begin asking a far more important question: what do I truly need from love? The space that no contact creates isn't just about them noticing your absence. It's about you noticing your presence. You start seeing the relationship more clearly, without the haze of emotional highs and lows. You can finally look at the situation from the outside, rather than being trapped in the storm of it. You begin to understand how much energy you were pouring into something that often gave you very little in return. That realization is painful, but it's also empowering. It reminds you that your time, your love, and your emotional labor are valuable, and they deserve to be reciprocated. Clarity also brings discernment. You stop romanticizing their potential and start seeing their patterns. You stop making excuses for why they couldn't meet you emotionally and start acknowledging how that left you feeling. You may even begin to question whether this person ever had the capacity to love you in the way you need. And that kind of clarity is a gift. It allows you to choose yourself without guilt. It allows you to let go of the fantasy and face the truth gently, but honestly. Ironically, the silence you feared becomes the very thing that guides you toward peace. Instead of wondering when they'll reach out, you begin to wonder less about them altogether. You become less concerned with what they're doing and more in tune with how you're healing. No contact gives your nervous system time to regulate, your heart time to breathe, and your mind space to clear. You become stronger, not because you shut your feelings off, but because you finally gave yourself the love and attention you were trying to give someone else. In that space, in that silence, you begin to remember your own worth. This isn't about you not. And once that clarity sets in, you're no longer waiting for them to come back. You're deciding if you even want them to. Thank you for taking the time to sit with this message, not just with your ears, but with your heart. These truths aren't always easy to hear, and they're even harder to live. But the fact that you're here seeking clarity, growth, and emotional freedom, that's a sign of your strength, not your weakness. Remember, choosing peace over chaos isn't selfish, it's survival. And walking away from what confuses you is sometimes the first step toward the love that will finally understand you. Take this silence, use it wisely, let it heal you. And when you're ready, come back to the world not looking for someone to complete you, but ready to share the wholeness you've already built. Take care of yourself. You deserve everything you've been trying to give to the wrong person. With deep respect, thank you. And goodbye, for now.